So it's absolutely crazy to think that if it wasn't for that minor detail, I would not have gotten this job at all. Hey, what's up guys? My name is the Cherno. Welcome back to the couch of relaxing conversations for another story time with Cherno. Today I thought that I would tell you the story of how I got my first job in the games industry and what was pretty much my first full-time job, my first real job in general. And this video is really going to be a good sequel, or I guess technically a prequel to the last video I made, which is why I left that job. So we all know how good prequels are. So to get the full picture of how I got this job in the first place, we kind of have to go back to the beginning of my time at university. So the year was 2014. No, that's wrong. So the year was 2013. I just finished high school the year before, and I had decided to do a software engineering degree at a university. And this was the first year of me actually starting that degree. At this point, I basically had decided that I wanted to work in the games industry. I was a lot more interested in the actual software engineering kind of programming aspect of that. I didn't want to do any kind of games degree, because I knew that from what I had seen at Open Days, those were a lot more about like how to use Unity. They were essentially all-inclusive kind of courses where you did like a little bit of programming, like 3D modeling, art-related stuff, game design. I wasn't really interested in any of that. I was interested specifically in the technology and I guess the technical aspects behind games. So I figured that doing a software engineering degree and then maybe like specializing or majoring in some sort of games-related thing would be a better way to go, because that was more or less the kind of stuff that I was interested in learning and the job that I essentially wanted. So I started the software engineering degree at the beginning of 2013. So you could study the course, and then the year before your last, provided that you had good enough grades, you could choose to do either like a 6-month or a 12-month industry placement. Basically, like you could go and work for a company in the industry that you were studying in for 6 or 12 months, and most of them were around 12 months or a year. And then the following year, you'd come back to university and complete that final year and then graduate. And in a lot of these cases, because you had already spent time working at a company for like a year, you could potentially get hired back by that company. Since you've already got experience with them and provided you did a good job, of course, they would want to offer you a full-time position. And that year of work experience would be like completely paid and everything. And I just thought that like that to me was so attractive, because even though I guess technically it prolongs your course by a year, the fact that you actually get real world experience and you can put that on your resume as like 1 year of work experience, that to me was so much more valuable than just going to university, completing a degree, and then, you know, trying to find a job with no experience, because of course everyone wants to hire someone with experience. So a quick recap, I was doing a 4-year degree, and then what would happen is the 4th year of that degree, I wouldn't be doing the degree, I would do the work experience. That was my plan. And then I'd come back on the 5th year to finish my degree, and everything was looking good. However, about halfway through that first semester, me and a couple of friends that I had made were basically seeing that what that specific course was, and because it was like specifically like a Bachelor of Engineering, I think software engineering being like the major, because it was a Bachelor of Engineering, part of the course was the fact that it would actually give you an engineering license. And in order to make that happen, they obviously had to teach you engineering in general. And so that first year was mostly made up of engineering units. There was some introduction like to programming unit, but a lot of the units or subjects in this university, they were called units. A lot of the units there were to do with engineering, nothing to do with programming whatsoever. So for example, in that first semester, I had done like an engineering maths unit. I had done a like electronic systems unit, and that electronic systems unit was basically all about like drawing circuit diagrams, like putting resistors down, trying to do the math to figure out like how much of everything you'd need, drawing PCBs. I mean, there were some fun parts to that I enjoyed, like the practical things when we got like the soldering irons out and we actually built stuff, that was fun. But for the most part, sitting in a classroom, drawing circuit diagrams or doing PCB designs in some PCB software on the computer, that was just not really at all related to what I wanted to do. And it's also important to remember that because of all of this, I was also going to be at uni for an extra year. And then I also have to pay for that extra year. And so me and these friends decided that this was not something we wanted to do. Maybe we can change into a degree that is a little bit more in line with what we care about and what we want to do, which is like programming. And so we found this other degree that this university offered, which was like a Bachelor of Science, Professional Software Development, being, I guess, the major. I'm not sure like if it was specifically the major or if it was like an area of focus anyway. And this degree was a 3-year degree. So it was 1 year less, which that's important to note, by the way. The fact that that one was a 4-year and a 3-year degree, remember that because we're going to come back to that. And so everything was approved and we were all able to switch into this new degree. But there was a bit of a caveat, and that was the fact that some of the subjects that we had done were not exactly the same, obviously, as the first-year subjects of that other degree. And specifically, some of them were able to be carried across. So the engineering maths degree that I did, I was able to basically get that credited towards another unit of study, which was in the new degree, which was, I think it was called like, I don't know, it was some really basic math thing about like booleans and like truth tables and just like completely just easy stuff that everyone knew without actually even having to study it. But I remember even that was like a bit of a fight. Like I had to be like, look, engineering maths, like clearly way more advanced. Yes, it didn't cover truth tables, but come on, like everyone knows what that is. Please credit me towards this unit. And then finally, they agreed. But the electronic systems degree, which was about PCBs and like circuit diagrams and resistors and all of that stuff, I couldn't get that transferred at all into the new degree. So because of that, I withdrew from that subject. I still finished my engineering maths and all the other units, which were basically, I think, the same in both of these degrees. And I ended that first semester having completed 3 units instead of 4 because I withdrew from electronic systems. I didn't need it. That's also an important detail. So long story short, second half of 2013 was great. I was in this new degree. I loved it. My friends loved it. We did like some like various programming subjects. There were still some things that weren't like the most fun things in the world, but we weren't really doing engineering specifically anymore. Like we weren't doing, I think, engineering maths B or the second part of that, which would have been in that semester. It was more in line with what we were doing, and we were happy because we'd basically be finishing a year early. We wouldn't get the engineering license, but we didn't really want that or care about that. It was great. So then in comes 2014. And that was the second year, I guess, of this 3-year degree. Now, because this was now a 3-year degree, that work experience year gets pushed up a year. It gets brought forward. So instead of it being the 4th year, and then the 5th year I'd come back and finish uni, it was the 3rd year now, and then the 4th year I'd come back and finish. So in other words, it would have been in 2015. The year started off great. I actually moved out of my parents' place that year. I just turned 19. I was living in an apartment. I was actually work-wise, I was making videos for Machinima, and that's how I was basically paying the bills. I'm sure a lot of you don't even know about that, but in 2014, I think in 2013 even, I made a series called Lapses for Machinima Realm. It was like a little Minecraft Machinima. Fortunately, all that stuff is gone because Machinima doesn't exist anymore. That was quite a cool little series, had like millions of views. It was really fun to produce. Then later I made some Call of Duty videos for Machinima Respawn. Anyway, good times is all I can say from that. The first semester of uni was really enjoyable. I think I did like a data structures and patterns unit, which was about C++. That was my first real exposure to C++, and I loved it. I was doing a lot of programming in my spare time as well, and because of that, because I was trying to build games and, you know, do all of this stuff, one of my lecturers ended up pointing me towards another kind of lecturer in the university who was essentially in charge of all the like game related units and just in general in charge of game dev related stuff at this university. And me and him ended up becoming pretty good friends. Like we'd go out to lunch together. I'd constantly come to his office like probably once every week at least, just to show him what I was working on, get his advice on things, because this was someone obviously who was a lot more qualified and had a lot more experience than me. And just being able to basically have a mentor like that and, you know, talk about all this stuff I was working on was really cool, because I was doing a lot of stuff in my spare time and I was trying to learn as much as possible. That was really important. I think the fact that I had that kind of friendship with him, that was really important to me getting a job, because what happened after that is I went to Europe during like the winter holidays here, so like June, July. And so after I returned from Europe, it was really time to start applying to all of these different jobs. And I remember the first thing that happened was literally that first week at uni that I was back, he called me into his office and he was like, look, I'm not really supposed to be telling you this, but one of the companies who wants to take in students for next year is EA. And they have a studio here in Melbourne, and they want 3 interns, and I think you'd be really good for that position. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool because first of all, at that rate, I think the companies, usually what would happen is these companies would basically contact this university or the university would contact them and be like, hey, we have students, do you want them? Or they'd be like, we want some interns. And then there'd be like this long list of companies. And then I think in a few weeks into that semester, you'd start applying to all of these companies with like your resume and your cover letter and all of that stuff. And this was like a few weeks even prior to that. So I already kind of had a heads up and I was like, cool, this sounds like exactly what I would want. And then when the list of companies came out, and there were probably like 10 to 20 companies on that list, so there were quite a few. When that came out, I saw very quickly that this whole like EA situation was by far just the best thing out of all of that. And the reason was there were about 20 companies. A lot of them had nothing to do with games. And in fact, I think EA was the only games company on that list. But furthermore, there was only one company, I think, that was actually in the city. EA was kind of on the outskirts of the city, and I live close to the city. And then a lot of the other companies, most of them, all of them really, were like a 40-minute to 1-hour drive from me. And when I looked up the address for this EA studio, it was literally walking distance from my place. So there was one place that was kind of in the city, which would have been about maybe like a half an hour commute. There was EA, which was like walking distance from my place. And by walking distance, I mean about a half an hour walk. So not like completely close, but still about a half an hour walk. And when I started working there, I ended up riding my skateboard a lot of the times to work, which is like 15 to 20 minutes away. So it was just in a really good location. And when I saw that and when I realized just how close it was to my place and how great that would be compared to like a 40 to 60 minute drive just way out of the city to try and get to these companies, I was like, I need this job. Like I don't even want to apply anywhere else. In fact, I don't think I did apply anywhere else, which was like clearly, obviously not the right thing to do. But I was just so set on this that I was like, I could not imagine working anywhere else. You know, I think one of the companies was like Zendesk, which is like kind of like a help desk, like online web app / website. A few of the other ones were to do with like school systems or like some kind of engineering work maybe. The point is none of it was games related. A lot of it sounded really boring. And I mean, obviously I would have still done it because I would need programming experience and I'm sure it wouldn't be as bad as it sounds. But for me at that point in time, I was like, you know what, if this does not work out, I'm just gonna keep doing YouTube and finish my degree. I don't want to work anywhere else. I need this specific job. And so of course I applied, I wrote my resume. We had a unit, I think, based on teaching us how to do that. And then I also wrote a cover letter. I emailed that to like the kind of work experience department in this university, who then emailed it to EA. And I think 2 hours later, I got a direct email from EA being like, hey, like, you know, we've read your resume. And then in my resume, I had like my YouTube channel and the fact that I was obviously interested in programming and I was kind of teaching that and doing all that stuff. And in my cover letter, I explained as well what I like doing and how I was really interested in like building game engines and all of this stuff. And so I got the email back from EA about 2 hours later and they were like, you know, we want to have an interview like as soon as possible. And also we have an event coming up that's kind of like a little bit exclusive that was like in some place in I think the 50th floor of some building in the city. You know, come along to that as well if you're interested. And so I was like, whoa, this is incredible. You know, let's have an interview. Like, I don't know, we set up an interview like 3 days later. But there was one problem and there was one complication. And that is the fact that I technically didn't qualify for this work experience based on this university's criteria. And the reason for that was, as I mentioned before, I had switched degrees and I had done 3 units of study in that first semester of my first year instead of 4. And one of the requirements for this work experience program, I think you needed like a credit average, and mine was quite a bit above that. And then you also needed to have completed 12 units. Now, this was semester 2 in my second year. So I'd done 3 semesters, which if you did full semesters, that would have been 4 times 3, which is 12 units. That would have been perfect. But I hadn't done 1 unit because I couldn't. I mean, I switched degrees and it was not relevant. So I had 11 units and I needed 12. And so the university, I think, ended up sending me an email being like, actually, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for this. And I was like, that's insane. Like, this is perfect. They want to interview me. This is great. And so I went to my head of game development friend And I was like, this sucks. Can you do anything about this? And he was like, let me see what I can do. I'll make a call. Then the next day I get a phone call being like, it's all good. I straightened it out. You're good to go. And I was like, thank you. And so I had that interview, I think the next day at EA, and that was in like October 2014. So I was 19, which is pretty crazy to think about. And I was, basically I had like a 15-minute interview with HR, and they just asked me about like where I see myself in 5 years, what kind of person I am, what my hobbies are, all of that stuff. And then came the technical director of the whole studio, along with his like right-hand man. And I'm just looking at this, it's so bright. Hold on, let me do something about this. So this is why it's better to close all of your windows and film in a completely controlled lighting environment, because anyway, whatever. And they gave me like a 2-hour technical interview. Like it went on for so long. Maybe it was like an hour and a half. I think maybe the full interview with HR was like 2 hours or something like that. But for an hour and a half, they asked me so many questions about various data structures, about like, shaders in OpenGL, and like about graphics programming, and a lot of the stuff that I guess had claimed to have done in my videos or in my cover letter or in one way or another. I definitely didn't answer a lot of their questions correctly, but I guess they were more interested in my kind of line of thinking and how I thought through these problems, even if I didn't know. And of course, they revealed later that they would have just kept going until I basically had said that there's no way that I knew any of this. Because the point was for me to, first of all, not pretend that I knew stuff that I didn't, and just admit to not knowing something, but also have a go at actually solving the problem to the best of my ability, which of course is pretty standard for an interview, although I don't think I probably didn't know that at the time. And then I remembered the last kind of half hour of that was them being like, all right, what do you want to know about us? And I had so many questions. I mean, I had done a bit of research on the studio. I saw some of the games they made. I asked them a bunch of questions about that. I asked them what it was like to work there, what their favorite things to work on were, all of that stuff. We just chatted for half an hour. And I remember we would be sitting there in silence, and I'd be like, I was like trying to think of something to say, because I was like, I don't want them to leave now. Like, this is a great conversation. And I felt like leading up to the interview, I was quite nervous. But then as soon as I sat down, I was just like, well, this is fine. This is fun. I'm going to try and enjoy this. And I wasn't nervous at all during the interview. And I'm like that a lot. Generally, leading up to an event or leading up to something, I'll be quite nervous. But then when it's actually happening, it's totally fine. I play music a lot, and it's pretty much the same as when I'm getting ready for a performance or something like that. It's quite nerve-wracking, but then when you're actually up there on stage performing, it's totally fine. And it's the same here. You've just got to actually take in the moment and enjoy it to the max, because soon it's going to be over, and then you'll be like, why didn't I enjoy myself more? And I think that's excellent advice for an interview, because it's a lot of fun to actually be in a situation like that, and also quite a unique experience that you, of course, don't get every day. And so long story short, after that technical interview, I again had some time with HR. They asked me how it went, and it was just great. And I think that was on like the Friday. And then the event that they had invited me to was on the following Thursday. And I actually ended up seeing the technical director of like that studio who had done the interview with me, along with my friend from the head of games development stuff at my university. He was there as well at the event. We ended up kind of being in a circle talking, and he asked him kind of in front of me, so I had the interview with Jan go, and he was like, well, I approved him, so it's, up to, I guess, HR and all of that stuff. And then the following day, I remember getting a phone call while I was like, I think I was volunteering at the help desk, at the programming help desk at university, as cheesy as that might sound. But I remember getting a phone call, and they were like, it was HR from the EA studio, and they were like, hey, just wanted to say that, we loved you and we want to offer you a contract. So we're going to send that over. And the technical director that interviewed you actually wants you on his team, which is like a game engine team. So we'll put you on that first. We'll see how that goes. And then, maybe we'll move you around and we'll kind of find a place for you. But ultimately, like, congratulations. We'll email you the contract. And yeah. So I remember that was quite an amazing feeling. I was particularly excited that I was not only working at the studio, but I was working on the technical director's team, because I knew that, well, he worked on the game engine team. And his team was in charge of building the game engine that this studio used for all of their games. So I was super excited about that. And yeah, and I think that the thing that always gets me with this is that if I had not changed degrees, if I had stayed in that software engineering degree, then I would never have gotten this internship, because this internship was taking place during 2015. But if I had done a 4-year degree instead of a 3-year degree, my work experience year would have been 2016. And with that internship specifically, so EA wanted 3 interns. They ended up hiring 2. They wanted, and one of them, I think, later became a designer or something. Like, it didn't even stay as a software engineer. So they basically got just me as a software engineer out of that. And then since then, I think they have never done a software engineering internship. I think 4 years down the road or 3 years down the road, they did like a game design internship or something. But especially this core technology team never had done an internship after that. And that EA studio as a whole didn't do an internship. So it's absolutely crazy to think that if it wasn't for that minor detail, I would not have gotten this job at all. And of course, not only that, but the fact that I was friends with that lecturer and he knew me and he knew I was good for this job, he was able to make that phone call to kind of rewrite the rules that this university had and actually get me accepted as well. And I think that's like really kind of humbling to think about, the fact that it's, you know, literally like the stars just had to align to make this happen. And I'm so thankful for that. And that internship was absolutely fantastic. Within like my first day at that internship, and I might make a video talking about what working at EA and specifically what that internship experience was like. If you guys are interested, leave a comment below. That first, like day 1, I had already pushed code to like the master branch of their code repository. And I think within 2 weeks, I was like in charge of developing like the level editor and adding new features and stuff. So in terms of how they treated me and that actual internship experience, it was absolutely amazing. And I talked a little bit about like how much I enjoyed working at EA and how good that experience was in my Why I Left EA video. I know a lot of comments said that they thought I was like lying or just painting EA in a good light. I'm not sure exactly why I would do that. I don't work for them anymore. They're definitely not paying me anything. But I do want to mention that, of course, I live in Australia, in Melbourne, and I'm sure that the experience of working for EA in Melbourne is very different from working for EA in the US. Because, well, first of all, we have different laws. We have different employee and employment laws. So that's gonna make a big difference. And then also in general, the Australian culture is completely different from the US. So again, my experience was fantastic and I would work there again for sure. But you know, if you don't like your experience in the US, then that's cool. So just keep that in mind. I'm specifically talking about EA in Australia. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this story time with Cherno. If you did, please do not forget to hit that like button. It really helps the channel out. Thank you all for watching. I will see you next time on this couch of relaxing conversations with another story. Goodbye.